from America's finest city. This is Real Talk San Diego on ESPN 1700.
What's happening, gang? You're in the stash, baby. And tracking down some cool local people, talking about some cool local stuff here on Real Talk Radio San Diego AM 1700 ESPN. The 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock hour, we got you locked down. And today, gang, I promise not to disappoint because we're going to be talking about some George Jetson kind of stuff, man. And I couldn't be more excited than to have David Feeney in the show today. David actually is the owner, founder of SD3D.com, because we're going to be talking about 3D printing. And if this is something that maybe isn't germane to your the vibration inside your little eardrums yet, it's going to be, and it's about to be over the next 60 minutes, because we're going to finally get into this, not only on a global aspect, but of course, you know, this is a local show right here in San Diego. So we're going to be talking about it on the local scale as well. And it's my humble intention, and I think, David, you're going to track with me on this, that 3D printing is going to change the world.
Definitely. I mean, that's why we got into the industry about 3 years ago, right out of, college. I went to SDSU.
Hey, yo.
Yeah, I graduated in 2012.
Local alum.
Yeah. So, I'm an Aztec, born and raised, and there's entrepreneurs all around SDSU in the San Diego area. And, right out of college, I, went to work for Solar Turbines, a really large corporation.
Sure.
And,
so you're one of the smart kids then that came out of SDSU.
Engineering, it's they have a great engineering program over there.
Sure they do.
Yeah. Yep. So, I went to work the 9 to 5, grind, and, it just wasn't doing it for me. So I got a 3D printer. It was around the time that, the industry was really just starting up.
Hold on. No one just wakes up, David, and gets a 3D printer. Like, how did that happen? You didn't just shop for that on Amazon, did you?
No. So, okay, so let me back up. I was in college, right? And I was in mechanical engineering. And it was around the same time that, this big company, I'm sure everybody has heard of, MakerBot, they were, coming out with their first 3D printers, filing their first patents, and I happened to be in this course that was going over that stuff every single day. And it was extremely exciting to me. And so, a couple of years later after I graduated, I decided to pick it back up when my uncle asked me if I could make him something. And what he wanted was basically a coffee mug that would brew your coffee when you're out, walking around and camping, so that you wouldn't have to have, your Keurig with you or whatever. And so...
plug-in style or what? Okay.
Yeah, so you would literally just screw the thing, and first you would obviously put the coffee grounds in and some hot water, and then you just screw it, and under your own pressure, it would just pressurize it into, coffee.
Self-actuated, got it.
Yeah, it was self-actuating. So he asked me to do that, and it was a prototype that he actually had tried to make, 10 years ago, and it had cost him about $20,000 to make 4 of these things. He iterated on it 4 times. I was able to get that done with a 3D printer for just $300 worth of material. And right there, I just saw the value in what 3D printing could do, not only for, him as an individual, but us as a whole society.
And that was your aha moment.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, and by the way, I'll backtrack. You said MakerBot. No one knows who MakerBot is, but you probably do. The solar turbine camp or the engineering crew up at SDSU. That concept, though, is exactly why I wanted to expound on this conversation. So thank you so much for hanging out with us here in the Stash. You're going to leave Stash Nation better than how you found them, I guarantee you. Because if you're like me, gang, this is one of those little, rogue objects that just sort of, hops into the brain and then kind of bounces and rattle cans around and then just finds itself with very little understanding or meaning on what in the hell it actually is. Right? It sounds really cute in concept and in theory. You think about it, you're like, oh yeah, there's this little machine, and next thing you know, it's a real thing. Mm-hmm. But get down into the weeds with us for a little bit, if I might. Because we're going to get into the weeds, trust me, about the way that I believe this is going to change the world. But how does it actually work?
Yeah, so the type of 3D, there's several different types, but the type that we do is called FDM, and it doesn't matter what that stands for, but basically it's just spitting out very, very fine layers of plastic over and over again on top of each other, and it's creating a form, whatever digital form that you had designed and on the computer. It basically takes that mesh, and it creates those lines out of molten plastic that then fuse together.
So that's what it is. So it's a plastic thing. Is it kind of like is it kind of resiny? Is that
So that's another type, right?
Okay.
So there are types where it's a liquid, vat basically on the bottom that's cured through a laser.
Okay.
That's called SLA. It's a different type.
Okay.
The good thing about the type that we do, where it's the molten plastic and it fuses right on top of each other, is that part is actually usable right off the printer. Whereas, a resin that has to be cured by a UV laser, if you go stick that in your car for a few days, it's going to be, no longer usable.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Are there any others? You mentioned there was a couple. So
Yeah, the last one that is really popular and extremely expensive is called SLS, and that one is for fusing metals together. So it's just like the SLA process, except for instead of having a liquid resin on the bottom of the vat, you have basically fine metallic particles.
Dude, that is crazy talk.
Yeah, no, it's insane.
And how does it fuse?
So it literally fuses through an extremely high power laser, and that's just
Like the heat?
Yeah, the heat.
Got it.
It's heat fusion, exactly.
Wow. Okay, so you do the FDM gang.
We do the FDM, exactly.
Which I think you said it best is definitely a step up from having to be in your car on a hot day and then come back and your iteration or your invention is melted,
Exactly.
magma on the floor there. So you're shooting basically layers of plastic.
Right.
Used heat as well, right? So it's heat fused.
Yeah.
And then it's happening at such a fast level. By the way, so if I was going to make that little screw thing,
Yeah.
and I hit print, as crazy as that sounds, how long would it take to actually manufacture?
Yeah, you just hit print right before you go to bed. You'd wake up in the morning and be ready for you to brew.
Okay, so that's about an 8 to 10 hour.
Yeah, it's about an 8-hour process for that full mechanism. And it was, I believe, around 20 ounces that it would hold, so it wasn't a small little cup either. It's good enough for your full morning.
Trip out. And so I forget the name. You'll probably remember this as an engineer, but what's that law that says that everything will double in speed and half in price every 2 years?
Moore's Law.
Yeah. So that probably will apply to this as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, for the
and
most
your
part,
FDM is going to be like 30 seconds in a couple, maybe a decade.
Yeah, I mean, the way that we like to explain it is it's kind of like how, the PC industry was way back in the 80s.
Yeah.
And everything is kind of like the dark ages right now. We have an automated machine that's not fully automated, and everybody is, extremely happy with where it is right now. But there's so much opportunity for being able to automate and distribute, physical items of somebody's living room that never actually has to touch that process in between.
Say that differently.
So
What process in between?
the actual process of printing the actual, part. So, if you see a commercial for one of these printers, you're going to think that, you just click print just like your 2D printer and it's going to come out exactly how you want it to. But that's just not the case. There's essentially there's a reason why I'm a mechanical engineer going into this thing, okay? There's a lot of thermodynamics that go into making your part perfect. And, obviously if you're spitting molten plastic out at very high speeds, you can imagine why that would be the case. And so not one single is called a material profile for basically how to program the machine to do the part.
Okay.
Not one single material profile will work for all cases. And a lot of times it's dependent on, even the temperature on that day and the humidity that you get. And so what we're working on specifically at SD3D is automating that whole back-end process and creating smart algorithms to develop those material profiles on the fly so that you don't need a technician with thermodynamics knowledge to click print.
Because what I'm hearing you say, from the lay perspective anyway, is that the devil in this is not just the details, it's in the amount of time
Yes.
that's required in that. So, the dummy, I'll raise my hand and volunteer for that, who just goes and thinks it's about hitting print, doesn't realize that it's going to be several incarnations to be able to get the actual thing to where it needs to be before it can actually be usable, so to speak, right?
Exactly.
So that really is your unique ability or your expertise.
That's our expertise right now. And in fact, where we really got a foothold in the market was there's a local company called CleverPet that did a Kickstarter. I don't know if you're familiar with crowdfunding campaigns.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so it's basically where people will put their product up and anybody can basically pre-order it.
Yep.
And so CleverPet was doing that. They're in the middle of a campaign and we were doing their prototyping for them. And the standard cost for FDM printing, it ended up making their machine cost $1,000 or even more. It was way too high.
Okay.
And so what we needed to do was reduce the cost for them. And so they actually came to us with a solution, which was, they recognized that we had that expertise that you're talking about, and they didn't. They were wasting their time, and it was, really expensive for them to 3D print on their own. So they just gave us their 3D printers. And we created this program called the Printer Farm. And out of that, we now offer literally the lowest cost 3D printing services in the world.
Wow. My man, that's exactly why. See, now, David, kicking it off fresh right out of the gate. I love that about you, man. David Feeney, owner of SD3D.com, right up there, Mayor. And by the way, this conversation is, of course, happening in your car, your cubicle, or wherever we're finding you right now, but it's also happening online through Twitter. We're streaming this live on the Meerkat app. So if you go to Follow the Stash on Twitter, you can ask David any question live right now in studio about this crazy new concept of 3D printing. So, David, coming up, Gam.
Awesome.
We're going to get into the whole inventors game on this, how this is going to totally change the way that inventors come to product with stuff. And I would say the amount of time as well in the different incarnations. That's why we got David in the stash today. So Real Talk Radio San Diego. We'll be right back.